Hello, and welcome to the Radiant Mission Podcast. My name is Rebecca Twomey, and I'm here with my amazing sister and co-host, Rachel Smith.
Hey, everyone.
Yeah, we are on a mission to encourage and inspire others as they navigate through this life and with their relationship with Christ. We are a faith-based podcast, so we're approaching all issues from that biblical lens. We've been talking quite a bit about health and mental health on the podcast. Today's discussion falls into the latter. What we think and feel is directly tied to our mental health. And I don't know very many people that aren't plagued by some sort of emotion that ends up wreaking havoc on their life or joy or contentment. And today's topic is about just that. One of the biggest culprits of unhappiness, of uncontentment, is having expectations. So, what are expectations? Well, I'm going to define it, and Rachel's going to give us the Hebrew definition. But according to Merriam-Webster's Dictionary, an expectation is the act or state of expecting, of anticipation, in expectation of what would happen. Something is expected, or it's not up to expectations. So, Rachel, tell us a little bit about what the Hebrew definition of expectation is.
Yeah, so I looked it up, and the Hebrew word for expectation is tikvah. Tiqva is how you spell it in English, although I don't always know if our spellings are perfect because we have a different language. But tikvah in the Hebrew, what I thought was really interesting is the first word for its definition is accord. Also hope, expectation, which is, why it's translated to that into English. Ground of hope, things hoped for, or outcome. So it seems like it has a heavy emphasis on hope.
That's very interesting. I mean, it makes sense, right? Because an expectations is a hope. It's a hope that something will or won't happen. And I think that in some senses, we can say that there's nothing wrong with having hope. We need to have hope when it comes to certain things.
Right.
But the danger comes, I believe, when our expectations are built in our mind as purpose, or as this is how it needs to be, or else if it doesn't meet this hope or this expectation, then I'm going to be disappointed. And I think some examples of this that are very easy, low-hanging fruit are things like birth.
Right.
When we're planning to have a baby, I don't know many people that don't have an expectation that everything is going to go perfectly.
Right. Yeah.
Or that things are going to go a certain way. Or if you have a birth plan, that your birth plan is going to roll out according to how it was written exactly.
Yeah.
And I think all of us then learn that that's not how it works. And birth is its own animal, and it's going to be what it is. And that was the biggest lesson for me. The second time was not to have expectations, but instead to focus on the Lord and focus on surrendering to
the
experience.
process. Yeah.
The process.
But it's interesting because if we think about it from like the Hebrew definition, like, yeah, you probably wouldn't have used the word expectation for your second birth, but you did have hope.
That's true. I did have hope.
It kind of seems like maybe our English word is not really grasping the totality of what is said in the Bible in the Hebrew. At least some of the time, I think.
That's true. And there's a difference between biblical hope and worldly expectation.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good point.
Because in the world, it's like, I expect that things are going to go my way.
Get what we want. Yeah.
Yes.
Like
we expect to get what we want when we want it. But the more we know the Lord, the more we realize and know his plan is the plan, and we can't change whatever that plan is as much as we want
Right.
to, or
Yeah.
hope.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, how many times do we have an expectation of our spouse that, that we expect that they're going to read our mind and know to do a certain thing or not to do a certain thing.
Yeah.
And then we're disappointed because they didn't read our mind.
Yeah. I just celebrated 10 years of marriage last weekend.
Yeah. Happy anniversary.
Thank you. I now just like saying that, which is weird. Because I also feel really old. But if I've learned anything in 10 years, expecting something of our spouse is risky business. I mean, but like we even still do it. Like you expect, like I will just confess something here.
Whoa.
On our actual anniversary, we didn't spend it like having any special plans because we just took a trip to Mexico and that was celebrating our anniversary, and we got every date we could possibly have in the next year in.
Yeah. Every day was a date.
Kid-free trip. Right. So on our actual anniversary, we have our kids, we had to get stuff done around the house. And we just had pizza at home with the kids. So it wasn't anything special, but we got into some bickering over the expectations, I guess, is a way to sum it up, but really like getting things done around the house that we were trying to work on a project together. And then the bickering turned into a little bit more. And the next day, my husband was like in an argument. He was like, "You didn't even get me a card for our anniversary."
You didn't get him a card?
No. And
Oh
this
my
is the thing,
gosh.
it's funny. This is what I'm confessing. And I do feel, I felt guilty about it, of course. And I do feel guilty about it because this is how it always goes for us. He doesn't care. He doesn't care. We said to each other, we weren't getting each other anything because our gift was the trip. And every year I get him a card, and I always do the thoughtful ones and write a nice, thoughtful thing. And every year he rushes out the morning of to get me something, or, I'm just saying a card.
Yeah.
Not like a gift, because we don't do that. And it's usually a funny one, and it's, like clearly done quickly. And we have these expectations in our marriage that I guess that this will be done. But this year I'm like, we're not doing anything. We already celebrated. And I literally thought he doesn't even care about the card. It would get thrown in the trash if it wasn't for me hoarding every card. Yeah. So that week just didn't get one. And then that morning I heard him leave the house, like before I had got out of bed. And I'm like, I bet he's going to go get me a card. And he gave me one. But then later said that it hurt his feelings that I didn't get one. And I was like, but you don't care about it. And he literally said, yeah, but I always expect you to do it anyway, even if I don't care about it. So that's just a small example of how this can look in a marriage. Is I expected him to not care. He expected me to do it, whether he cares or not. Because I guess it's like, I think he doesn't really care. It's just a piece of paper. But sometimes, even if you've been married 10 years, having someone do something tangible that shows their love for you, it still matters.
It's a symbol that you do care.
Right.
Even though it doesn't really mean anything because it's a piece of paper, right? That you paid probably $7.99 for these days.
Right?
Cards are a racket, but at the same time, it is about, it's the phrase, it's the thought that counts. It is the thought. And so now you just know next year, just write them up a card,
Yeah, I know. I do. I really, it's funny because I think that is very unlike me. And I just don't feel like myself right now. I think it's just this pregnancy and I just
It's
like,
the baby. The baby is
yeah,
very unthoughtful.
you're right. It is. But I'm normally like very sentimental. And right now I'm just like, this is getting through the day.
Well,
Just
that was a
another
great
day.
example. I definitely, well, you know that I can relate to that because my husband is not a gifts. Gifts is he's the antithesis, the opposite love language of gifts is historically has been him. He's
Right.
the type that the day before a holiday or even the day of a holiday is when he will be like, "Oh, I guess I have to get something because there's an expectation. Let me go
Right.
to Walgreens and find something." And that has been difficult for me as somebody who is I would say that I am more acts of service in a way, but I am gifts because I
No,
like
I
to.
would absolutely say that one of your strong languages is gifts because you've always been that way for me. Both
Yeah.
you and mom are that way. I think you
Mhm.
get it from mom, and she's definitely acts of service and gifts.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I gifts is not my love language either. Like I never feel like I know what to get someone. I don't feel creative. And I've always felt like literally since I was young. I don't know if you remember this, but this is just a tangent. But so we were homeschooled and I was the youngest of four and the only one to ever go to public school starting in ninth grade.
Mhm.
And my first week of school, I was very nervous for it. And so instead of taking the bus, you took me to school every day and you put in my backpack every day that week a special gift and a note.
Wow, I don't remember
And
doing that.
you do or you don't?
I don't remember doing that.
Oh,
It sounds like
yeah.
something I would do, but
Yes. And I remember it because it was so, I mean, it was so special, but I also feel like that's like part of your personality
Mhm.
is helping someone to feel better through a gift, which,
Mhm.
and also acts of service, those kind of go hand in hand. But
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. Oh, did you
yeah,
save any of those?
I probably do. They're probably in a box at mom's house.
Well,
All
I'll
our
tell
stuff
you
is.
the most extreme thing that I ever did is when Mike and I lived up north and he worked in the city. We both worked in the city. I used to, it started off with I would put notes in his lunch, but it got bad. And by bad, I just mean I created so much work for myself. I used to make him menus
Oh, I
in
remember
Canva.
that.
Do you remember that? I would
Yes.
make him a menu. Literally, you guys, I would design in Canva a menu for the week and I would name things with clever names because that was how I was expressing that I loved him, that I was making him lunch and I was naming everything. But it used to hurt me so bad that he would come home and not have eaten his lunch or have gone out for lunch or like not. I felt like he didn't appreciate my homemade lunches and menus. But again, that's like an expectation that I
Right.
was creating because I was the one who was making all this work for myself and doing this for him, expecting that he was going to enjoy it. But sometimes we're just not in the mood for certain things. Sometimes we don't want to eat the same thing for 2 days in a row, for example. So, but yeah, I wanted to go back to holidays because that was something that we struggled with in the first couple of years of our relationship to the point where I called you and I was like, you need to help Mike
Yeah.
because he is not doing anything. What was it? Mother's Day.
I
And I
think it
think
was
our
your first Mother's
anniversary,
Day. Yeah.
it was like 2 in a row because Mother's Day and our anniversary are like a week apart.
Yeah.
And he totally didn't do anything for either of those. And I was really upset about it because I obviously had this expectation of flowers and a card and a gift because that is just my worldly expectation.
Right.
But it's kind of funny because he he jokes about it all the time because he had those failures and then we, argued about it and everything. I kind of got to the point where I stopped expecting anything. And he jokes that this was his strategy all along, was to break me down so that if he does anything, then it's like, wow, you did something.
I think that's kind of like probably what plays into after 10 years of marriage. I don't expect much out of an anniversary. So if he wouldn't have got me a card, I would have been cool. But that's it.
Yeah.
This is what happens over time is you express love to one another and no longer such cute, lovey-dovey, time-consuming ways.
Yes, definitely.
Ain't nobody got time for that anymore.
Yeah. Ain't nobody got time to make lunch menus.
Oh my gosh. I know. That's what makes me laugh about the thought of you doing that is because, you didn't have kids then and everything. And now it's like, make me lunch.
Exactly. Just the act of someone making the other person food or getting them a drink or bringing frozen waffles that have been toasted, that is like above and beyond these days.
Right. So I think it's for this to play into expectations within a marriage is they definitely change over the years,
They
early
do.
on and pre-kids. Like now our expectations of our husbands are a lot more kid related. Like I, expect them to carry some of the load. And then when that's not met, really what happens is whenever an expectation is not met, it results in contentions. It results in anger. It results in disappointment and frustration and just friction between us and another person. I know it's interesting we're doing this topic because I feel like this has been one of the biggest problems in my life from a young age is expecting things of other people's, having an expectation in a relationship. And then when someone, and I'm not even just saying like a spouse, like any friendship, family relationship, any parents, any of it, when you have an expectation and then it's not met, that what just keeps coming to my mind is what I'm sure we're going to go into more is expectation is the thief of joy. Like I know when I first became a mother, what becomes very important to a lot of women, including myself, is your relationship with your own mother. And as a woman, that's just something that's very important to me. And as you know, and you are as well, I'm very close with our mother. But when I first had children, I would see how other people, their, dynamic with their parents, whether it was because they lived close and they were able to do a lot or whatever. And I really realized that and faced that early on is comparing what I had in my parents versus others and the help that I would receive or the attention that I would receive or whatever it was. Now that I'm a mom and I need help with my kids, it really made me face, and I feel like kind of deal with the expectations that I would have of her. And she is the most wonderful self-sacrificing grandmother on the planet. She's gonna have her 13th grandchild. I don't know, they got so many now. The thing is though, is expecting her or anyone to be like someone else's, that is unfair of me, and that only affects my joy. And when I then saw like how her personality and who she is and what that does for me and my children is exactly what I need. It's exactly what the Lord has given. And then that only opened up our relationship to have a even better relationship. It's hard to have a good relationship with someone when you have expectations in your mind that are never going to be reality because that's
Yeah.
not who they are. You really have part of expectations is accepting someone for who they are and then appreciating them for that.
Exactly. You are absolutely spot on with that. And I also see a parallel between expectation and comparison. I
Yes.
see those two happen a lot. And I'll give you an example. Our mom is so good that I've had friends that have said to me, man, I wish my mom was like your mom.
Yeah.
I wish I had a Pammy.
Yeah.
I wish I had a mom that made me soup when I'm sick,
Yeah.
you know? And it's it's really flattering, obviously, to be like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's my mom's great. But at the same time, how often do we do that ourselves in whatever relationship?
Right.
I wish my husband cooked dinner every night, or I wish my, you know, children listened to me when I told them to pick up their toys, whatever it might be. I think that sometimes I can just see how these two things cross over and go hand in hand. And exactly what you said before, they end up being a thief of our joy, a thief of our contentment, because we're spending all of our time focused on expectations and comparing ourselves to other people and other people's families, that we don't see that what we have right in front of us is the gift.
Right.
We have the gift of having spouses. We have the gift of having children. We have the gifts of having parents
Yeah.
and siblings. And that in and of itself is a gift. And the more we focus on the gift and the less we focus on what we don't have or what they're not doing, the quote, happier we'll be.
Right.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, absolutely. I think bringing kids into it too. Oh, man, that's where I really was broken on expectations is from we've gone over my birth stories, which obviously were the opposite of what I hoped for or expected.
Mhm.
But really what broke me like a wild stallion was my journey with breastfeeding my first son. Like I had the highest expectations
Mm,
anyone
that's a
could
good point.
have. And I was so humbled
Mm,
on it not going the way I expected whatsoever. It was one of the hardest things that I've ever done in my life.
mm.
And that to me, I feel like was a great shove off the cliff into motherhood because that's how it goes is while so much of motherhood is way more wonderful than I could ever imagine, the expectations as my children have gotten older of being a certain way or whatever, if I have let go of more and more because I've realized how unfair it is to them and
Mhm,
it's not healthy.
mhm.
And you really like can't expect much out of a 2-year-old. If you
You
do,
can't
like
you can't expect anything out of children, and you don't the thing is, I think we sometimes want to create personalities for our children, or we want to make a prediction on it, like, oh,
yeah,
my child's going to be just like the dad or just like the mom, or your parent wishes ill upon you. I hope they're just like you,
yeah,
those types of things. But the truth is that they're an individual and they're
right,
going to be who they are. And they may have facets of one parent or the other or both. But at the end of the day, our lesson that we learn in parenthood is to learn our child's personality and who they are and how they are and not expect them to be like we were if we were
right.
good. Haha, hint, hint, wink, wink. I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
Or, just not to expect anything, to allow them to come into who they are as a person.
right. And like who God made them to be. And there also is an element of children are sponges and they're also mirrors. Like they,
That's true.
from a young age, like they do start mimicking what they see. I'm
Oh,
really,
yes.
yes,
100%. I mean, Brooke is almost 3.
Yeah.
And she repeats everything that I do and say. And sometimes when I go, where did she get that from? It's probably from me or from Mike. If it's bad, I'll blame him.
I'm really in the ringer with that right now with my older son, Everett. He's about to be 7. And lately, like the past month or so, he's barking orders at his little brother in this really shrill voice. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he sounds just like me. And it's making me feel so bad because he'll be like, Maverick, clean this up right now. And I'll be like, why are you so like high strung? Like, chill out, man. Like, ask him nicely. And then I immediately, like, in my head, I'm like, no, I don't think I sound that way.
Until
But
you hear it back.
right when you hear it from a 6-year-old, then I'm like, dang, like I did this. And then it reveals like how much more kindly I should speak, which I do make efforts of. It's kind of funny because what he's mimicking often is how I sound when I'm like stressed out and I'm like, like we're in a hurry, like get your shoes on, come on, we got to get to the, like we all get, but it's like that's becoming in like that's the behavior he's repeating all of the time. So
no.
I feel really bad, and it just makes me self-reflect of that correction has to start with me.
Yeah.
Instead of me saying like, don't talk like that.
Yeah.
So
I get what you're saying. You have to correct your own attitude and behavior in the way that you speak. I definitely get that because right now Brooke is in that bossy phase with her little brother. She's almost 3. He's only 8 months old.
yeah.
And she is actually very good with him, very sweet, very loving, but she also is 2. And so she'll walk up to him and take a toy away and, that's mine. She's going through that phase. But then there's some times where I'll notice she'll say to him, like, don't do that, brother. And I know in those moments, I need to recorrect it to, if it is dangerous and it's something he shouldn't be doing or eating or whatever, or if he's pulling her hair. There was actually a really good video on this I shared a couple weeks ago of how a parent simulated what to say when a little kid pulls your hair, to say, release, please let go. Because I know that when he grabs my hair, I just say, let go, brother. And it doesn't sound the same from a 2-year-old. Let go.
Yeah.
And so it does start with us to really pay attention to the way that we do say things. And it's not always easy, especially when you're pregnant, because the last thing you want to do is put it on just to put it on. And when you don't feel good and you're tired and you're grouchy.
Yeah.
But we do also have to look at what's the output if we don't.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's kind of why I brought this up in regards to expectations is we expect our children to behave a certain way, but do we expect that of ourselves as well?
Yeah. What expectations do we have about ourselves? Any?
Right.
We seem to have them plenty about other people.
Right. Exactly.
Do we
And
expect that we're just going to fail all the time and that's okay, but everybody else has to be what we expect them to be?
right. Yeah, exactly.
Well, there is a great verse on this in Proverbs 10:28, where we're told the hope of the righteous brings joy, but the expectation of the wicked will perish. And I find it interesting, especially since in the Hebrew, expectation can mean hope. It makes me
Right.
wonder what 2 words they're using in this verse in the Hebrew for hope and then
Let me
expectation.
look that up real quick because when I looked up in the Blue Letter Bible app, the word expectation, I use Hebrews 10:28. So
Okay.
it's Tikvah and that verse, but let me look up hope. the hope of righteousness is, let's see if I can pronounce this. Tohalet. Tohalet means hope.
Okay.
So tikva in the same verse, the first definition in it is cord, which I'm still trying to,
CORD.
right. I'm still trying to figure out. There's got to be some deep meaning there, but
Mhm.
cord, hope, expectation. And so that's interesting because it's the hope of righteousness brings joy, but the hope of the wicked will perish is
Mhm.
another way we could say that.
When we break that down, I mean, obviously it's very deep, and there's a lot of verses where it speaks to the fact that God alone is in charge of the future. And I want to share some of those, but this verse specifically to me, it kind of speaks to the hope of those who have their faith in the Lord will experience joy.
Right.
But the hope of those who have ill expectations or selfish expectation will, obviously all of us are going to perish, but so I kind of take this to mean, their expectation is not going to come to fruition. It's kind of how I'm contextualizing this a little bit.
Yeah.
That if you have an expectation that is rooted in the Lord's plan for you, then you're going to have joy. But if you don't, and your expectation is that someone's going to do what you want them to do, you're not going to see that happening.
Yeah. I have said before, one of my philosophies on reading the word is to never read a verse.
True,
So,
before and after.
right. So to take it in context, I'm just kind of looking at it right now, reading just the verses around it. They all mirror each other. This is verse 27. The fear of Yahweh prolongs life, but the years of the wicked will be shortened. The hope of the righteous is gladness, but the expectation of the wicked perishes. The way of Yahweh is a stronghold to the upright, but ruin to the workers of iniquity. So they all are like comparing
Sure.
righteous way versus wicked way.
Put your hope in the Lord. And this kind of leads, to a very common verse that we often talk about, but I think really speaks to the fact that God alone is in charge of the future. He's in charge of people and what is going to happen. And that's Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans for, this version says, welfare and not evil, to give you a hope in a future. I don't really like this version. I think this is ESV. Plans for a hope in a future is usually how it reads first. But the point is, God alone knows what's next. He knows the plan. And when we set ourselves up to have expectations, that's when we set ourselves up for disappointment. Another verse that speaks to this is Psalm 62:5. For God alone, O my soul, wait in silence, for my hope is from him. Matthew 11:28. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. We often put ourselves into these scenarios of pain because of expectation, because we have these unrealistic hopes. And the Lord clearly tells us, listen, I'm directing all of this. Put your faith in me, put your hope in me, put you're heavy because of all this stuff that you're building inside of yourself. I'll give you rest, but you have to actually come talk to me, read the word, pray.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I, just this morning, my husband and I are trying to sell our house. We just went on the market and, we're in the having showings things part. And it's like, he said, yeah. And if someone makes us an offer and then we, are actually selling the house, then we have to do this, and this, and this, and this, and this. And I'm like, those are tomorrow's problems. I am like, my mind can't even go there because today's problem is enough. It's to expect this to go any way is too much for my pregnant mind to handle.
Well, first of all, you're a professional mover, so you'll be
Right.
fine.
Nobody is more prepared than me.
No one. Second of all, the next verse that I have in our notes here speaks exactly to
Right.
this.
Yeah.
Philippians 4:6. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to the Lord. So he
Right.
does say we can make requests, but a request is different than an expectation.
Yeah. And that's exactly how I'm feeling about this situation is, I'm praying about it, but I find such peace in praying exactly how Yeshua instructed us of your kingdom come, your will be done, is when you pray like, Lord, whatever your will is for this situation, what I tend to do is ask, like, align my heart with your will. Because let your will be done and prepare me for that.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
if I have an expectation of this is going to go this way and this way and this way, and it doesn't go that way, I've just dealt with so many times. That's where things get stressful. That's where we have such a hard time is the peace of the Lord surpasses all understanding when we are rooted in him. It's when we kind of go off in our own ways that it becomes intense and
Yeah,
stressful.
absolutely. The Lord calls for us to trust him, to trust his plan and to be content. There was another verse out of Philippians 4:11-13. Not that I am speaking of being in need, for I have learned in whatever situation I am to be content. I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That one it's just such a beautiful, verse
I
and
think,
testament.
yeah, I think that one is so important in context because so many people say, I can do anything in Christ who strengthens me. But to hear like what is in that verse with that statement of being content in any circumstance, and it's actually talking about physical needs, like him being in prison and starving, or when he lived a good life. This is Paul who said that, is
Mhm.
any of it can be done when you're in Christ because our strength comes from him.
Mhm.
So obviously none of our expectations for life is to be imprisoned and starving and
Mhm.
then beheaded. I don't think any of us would say that's an expectation. But what Paul is doing, leading by example, is you can find contentment even in the worst circumstances if your heart is in the right place.
That's right. Yeah, definitely. You can find the beauty in those moments. I mean, I think most people have been at the bottom, and maybe someone listening is at the bottom right now. And when you're at the bottom, everything seems impossible and hard and horrible. But the Lord has a way of lifting us up.
Yeah.
He has a way of lifting us out of those things. And I think it's when you rise out from the bottom and you look back, or you have something happen in your life when you're not at the bottom and you go, man, this kind of stinks. But I remember when I was at the bottom.
Yeah.
I remember when I had the couple of dollars left to pay all of my bills for
Mm-hmm.
this month. And after that, I wasn't going to have any money to pay anything.
Yep.
You remember those times. And I think that I don't want to say that it's necessarily the Lord that puts us in those situations, because we're humans and we make choices and we put ourselves into a lot of situations, but it's about taking the lesson out of it. It's about
Yeah.
taking, what can we learn from every situation that we're put in, whether it's good or bad? And, how can we communicate back with the Lord after we go through those trials to say, I saw your hand in that. And I saw how you helped me out of this. I see how selling my house is going to be very hard, but I see that you have a future for me.
Right.
You have something better for me. And so I'm going to choose to be joyful about the situation that is daunting, because I know that on the other side, you have something good for me.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's whatever the outcome of any circumstance. I've said it before on the podcast, is our end goal is not happiness in this life. Our end goal is to be in the kingdom of God. That's what happens. That's how he can promise us eternal life, because that's what it's about. This is all just the trials to sanctify us, because our spirit will carry on. Who we are at our core is being crushed and polished like a diamond. This life is, if you looked at a diamond that was just excavated from a mountainside or whatever, it's dirty, it's rough, it's not that special looking. It's when it was put in the pressure and the, whatever they call all their terms, the sculpting by the geologist. I don't know who
Aren't they
crafts diamonds.
gemologists?
Gemologists, right? I'm using this analogy very roughly because I don't know any of the terms, but if you could grasp the picture with me, what I'm saying is, when it's sculpted by the master, it is a beautiful, worthy to be admired gem. And that's what our life on earth is. And it's going to be until we're not in these flesh tents anymore, is when we're in his glory. Yeah. When we're in his glory, our spirit will be a worthy gem. I can't think of the scripture off the top of my head, but we are described as that to him. But right now we're in the muck of life, and we're going to have just as many, if not more, hardships as we are high points, but we can learn to be content through it all.
Yes, absolutely. That was kind of my final note in here, was that we're going to have disappointments in life, especially because we have expectations.
Right.
We're going to experience pain and heartache and trauma. And so today's message, I believe, about expectation is really just to encourage others that the Lord has a plan for our lives. And if we lean into him, he will be our comforter. And exactly what you said, we have to think about the final goal. Is our final goal just to be happy? Happy is subjective, right? I mean, how many people say, you hear this in the world a lot, I just want my child to be happy. Well, we choose whether or not we're going to be happy. That's a subjective emotion.
Right.
I could have a stomach ache and not feel good, but that doesn't mean that I'm not happy. I don't feel good, but I can choose to still have happiness in my life. And so when we change the focus from happiness or expectations being met to simply, there is a plan, I'm following the plan, and let me put my faith and hope and trust in the Lord, I think it can alleviate a lot of the pain of life.
Yeah. Right.
At least I hope so. Any final thoughts on this, Ray?
No, I think that is exactly right. I think it just comes down to contentment. One other verse that we had in our notes is 1 Timothy 6:6-8. Now there is a now there is great gain in godliness with contentment. For we brought nothing into the world, and we cannot take anything out of the world. But if we have food and clothing, with these we will be content. So that's anything more than food and clothing is an expectation. If we have that, we can be content, and we also can be so much more better off than a lot of people, because some people don't even have that and they still can live in joy.
Mm-hmm. It's
So
true.
It really does just feel like we can all walk in the joy of the Lord, which means that we're just taking some of his joy by being content with what we have and who we are and the people in front of us right now.
Yeah, exactly. I love that.
Yeah.
Great summary. And it kind of circles back to what Mike, he claims his attempt was if he lowers the standard, then anything seems great. If we just lower the standard, lower our expectations for everything, we may be pleasantly surprised by life.
And it's funny he says that, because I would say he is one of the most content people I've ever met. Like he is
very content.
Easygoing.
He's a things person though, that I think he doesn't live with expectations. He has expectations of no one.
Yeah.
He doesn't like things. So there's very little ways for him to be disappointed. we could all learn a lesson from Mike.
Yeah.
Which I say that all the time. It's one of the things that I love and admire the most about him, and why I am so attracted to him as a person and as a partner, is because he is everything that I wish that I could be in many ways.
This is reminding me right now, maybe we need to have him on the podcast again when I'm here too, so that we can all take life lessons from Mike. Because I'm just thinking, earlier I almost said that one way to learn contentment is having siblings, because you don't get your way most of your life when you grow up with another person. But Mike was an only child, and he had every possession that any person could have showered on them, because
some surprises.
Yes. That he grew up with just so much abundance because his family just cherished him.
Mm-hmm.
And yet as an adult, he's just this easygoing, content with very little person.
It's amazing.
I don't know how
it's almost like though he got too much stuff. And so now he's like, I don't want anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think you can get to that point too, where you have everything and then you don't need anything more, but we should have him on. We should pick his brain on some of this.
Yeah. Yeah. He's just a very positive person, and there's a lot that could be learned from that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in today and for being on this journey with us. I hope that this episode was inspiring and encouraging to you, and it's got you feeling good about the future and hopes and expectations, and it's got you reflecting as well. If you'd like to follow along outside the podcast, you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all with The Radiant Mission. And today we're going to close with Psalm 23, verses 1-6. And it's a Psalm of David. I'm sure you've heard it many times.
Well, I know it in song form.
In what? In
song form. Like singing it. My kids learned it, like memorized it by singing it.
Do you want to sing it?
Oh, no. I don't know if we're that close with our listeners yet that I'm going to sing.
You don't know? Okay. Well, we'll save it for next time.
Maybe another time.
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. And we are wishing you a radiant week. We'll see you on the next one.
Bye, guys.
Bye.